They found it in a sector of the Wammy's house archive that didn't exist. A 12-minute transmission, time-stamped hours before the system went dark. He wasn't talking to the police. He wasn't talking to his enemies. He was talking to the only people who would ever truly understand the cost of being L. He was talking to you.
There's a specific type of person who clicks on a video about L Lawliet at this hour. I know your symptoms because they were mine. You think faster than you feel. You understand people better than you connect with them. And lately, maybe not today, maybe not this week, but recently you had a moment where you solved someone. You saw through them completely. And instead of feeling powerful, you felt absolutely nothing. That blankness, that flat, gray nothing. That's not intelligence. That's the first symptom of something. If you are hearing this, then the probability of my physical continuity has collapsed to zero. I am speaking from the only place I was ever honest, the silence between deductions. Not the performance. Not the crouch, or the sugar cubes, or the blank stare that made people uncomfortable enough to stop asking personal questions. I'm speaking from underneath all of that. The place I never showed anyone. This is not a case file. This is a system failure report. And the system that failed is me. I was not a genius. I was a compensation engine. Every deduction I ever made, every inference, every probabilistic model was a substitution. I replaced the part of myself that was supposed to feel with a part that could only solve. And for 25 years, that substitution looked like mastery. But a substitution is not a solution. It is a delay. And all delays eventually expire. I once spoke to children about monsters. I cataloged them clinically. Those who lie without reason, those who destroy without hunger. I made it sound like monsters were a solvable equation. But I left out the category I belonged to. The most dangerous monster is the one who has replaced his entire humanity with a heuristic, a shortcut that processes people as data and calls the output justice. I stripped away my name and called it security. I stripped away my face and called it strategy. I stripped away every human connection and called it operational necessity. I sat in dark rooms eating sugar because sweetness was the last sensory experience I allowed myself that wasn't instrumental. Everything else, every conversation, every handshake, was a diagnostic. I wasn't relating to people. I was running them through pattern recognition software housed inside a human body. And it worked. Beautifully. I solved cases that governments couldn't touch. I became the empirical void that swallowed monsters whole. And I was so efficient that nobody in 25 years thought to ask whether the void was eating me too. It was. Let me tell you about Light Yagami. Not the case. You know the case. I want to tell you about sitting across from a man you know is a murderer. You know it the way you know gravity, not because you see it, but because everything bends toward it, and realizing he is the closest thing to a companion you have ever had. I should have ended it earlier. I had sufficient evidence weeks before the end. I chose not to, because the game was the only thing that made me feel like a person instead of a processor. When your only experience of connection is adversarial, when the closest you've felt to being understood is watching your opponent anticipate your move, you are no longer a detective, you are a symptom. And so are you. There was a moment I never told anyone about. 3 days before the end. I was sitting across from Light in the investigation room. Everyone else had left. He was writing in a notebook, not the notebook, just case notes, and for a fraction of a second I forgot he was Kira. For a fraction of a second he was just a person sitting near me in a quiet room, and I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Comfort, not strategic comfort, not the satisfaction of a correct deduction, the simple animal warmth of not being alone. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then my pattern recognition re-engaged, and the moment collapsed, and I was L again, and he was Kira again, and the room was a crime scene again. But those 4 seconds haunt me more than any case I've ever solved, because they proved that the human being inside the machine was still alive, still starving. And I chose deliberately, with full diagnostic awareness, to let him starve, because feeding him would have meant compromising the investigation. I chose the case over the person. And the person never forgave me. Stop. I need to talk to you now. Not near, not mellow. You. I've been observing this channel's work. The clinical audits. Ayanokoji. Aizen. The frameworks of cognitive dominance. You consume these videos and feel a tightening in your chest that you've been misidentifying as inspiration. It isn't. It's recognition. You see yourself in these characters not in their power but in their emptiness. And instead of confronting that emptiness, you've been aestheticizing it, turning your loneliness into a philosophy and calling it evolution. I did the same thing for 25 years. I told myself emotional distance was the price of exceptional cognition. That narrative let me sit in a dark room at 3 a.m. and feel above the world instead of hiding from it. But here is what no audit on this channel has ever said. The coldness you admire is not strength. It is a system running out of power and interpreting its own shutdown as transcendence. Aizen stood in the heavens and found nothing but a panoramic view of his own isolation. Ayanokoji solved every room and discovered that solving a room and belonging in one are not the same operation. And I caught the most dangerous killer in history, and my reward was realizing the only person who understood me was holding the murder weapon. You are building the same architecture right now. Every time you feel superior to the people around you, every time you perform intelligence as a substitute for intimacy, you are laying another brick in a room that will eventually have no doors. The bells, they've been ringing all day. I know what that sound is. It is a system reaching terminal awareness the moment a processor realizes it has been running so long without maintenance that the output has become indistinguishable from noise. Everything is very quiet now. I can feel the silence in my teeth, in the space between heartbeats where deductions used to live. For 25 years, that space was filled with case files and probability matrices. Now it's just air. And the air is so cold it burns. This is what the other side of genius sounds like. Not a symphony, static. Existential static. My final deduction. Not about Kira, about you. You are not watching this because you admire L. You are watching because you are terrified you are becoming him. You can feel yourself getting sharper and colder simultaneously. You can feel the distance growing between you and everyone you used to love, and you've been telling yourself that distance is the price of growth. It isn't. Growth would require you to be both intelligent and open, both analytical and present. You can still choose that. I couldn't. My architecture was too far gone. My name is L Lawliet. I haven't said it in over a decade. It feels like a coat I outgrew years ago, but it is the one variable in my life that was given to me before I learned to calculate. The one I should have held on to when I let everything else go. Solve the puzzles. Protect the innocent. But when the screen goes dark, don't sit in the silence and call it home. Find someone who doesn't understand you and let them try. Let them fail. Let yourself fail with them. That failure will feel like noise, but I promise you that noise is the only thing separating a life from a program. Eat something sweet. Not because it helps the logic. I lied about that. It was the only thing I did that didn't have a reason, and that made it the most human thing I had left. Terminal closing. Goodbye, Light. Goodbye, everyone. Signal lost.